And welcome to this year's end of the year video, which is going to consist of what the best retro handheld of the year is. Now, this is also going to include other retro handhelds that were not released this year, but that I didn't get really a chance to include in a list like this previously. So there are going to be some slightly older handhelds on here as well, and I am going to be including some handhelds also that aren't really technically retro handhelds, but can definitely be used for emulation and that kind of thing. This is going to be a pretty massive list, if any, and this is why it's taken me so long to work on this video, because I needed to get my thoughts together. Now, with that said, I will not be including any Windows systems or the Steam Deck for that matter, because to me, these are portable PCs, even though they're great for emulation as well. I just don't think that they're all that feasible for emulation. Like, I don't think that you should go out of your way to buy one of these just for emulation. So I'm going to just stick with Linux-based devices again, except for the Steam Deck, and I'm going to be sticking with Android devices, as well as a couple of other exceptions. So now, with that said, let's jump into what the best retro handheld of 2022 is. Now, this isn't going to be an objective list, of course. This is all going to be opinion-based, and there are going to be handhelds that are going to be best for different people. Now, let's dive right in. So the very first category that I wanted to touch on is actually going to be the Outlier category, and that's going to be with systems that are not Linux or Android based. So these are going to be systems like the 3DS, the PlayStation Vita, and the PSP. And yes, I know, these aren't really technically meant to be retro handhelds, but they are fantastic emulators today that I definitely vouch for, and I can strongly recommend to a lot of people. But you might not want to get all three of these. You might just want to get one of these and just stick with that one. And I think that any one of these will be a fantastic option, but that is going to depend on the person. For instance, if you are looking for a clamshell handheld, then you're probably going to want to get the 3DS. And in this case, I've actually got the new 3DS XL that has been homebrewed to death at this point. Now, this device is a really, really fun one. I mean, it's always been that way. So on this device, you can obviously play 3DS games, but you can play SNES, N64, you can play GBA, Game Boy, and so many other systems as well that this device can emulate. Now, it will not emulate PSP, but it will still do a very good job for the most part when it comes to all of those other systems that I mentioned. And now, like I said, you can also play those 3DS games, and there are so many amazing titles here. Like, for example, I've got Shin Megami Tensei Strange Journey Redux. Now, this isn't going to be the type of game for everybody, obviously, but just the fact that you can do so much on this is so good. And you also do get a pretty large display. You do get a pretty large touchscreen as well. It's just a really good gaming experience if you're looking for a clamshell and the one that you can store so many things onto. Now, between this and the PlayStation Vita, this is going to be easier to homebrew, and it's going to be easier to work with as well for the most part. So that's probably when I would recommend the 3DS to people instead of the PlayStation Vita, because the 3DS is a very versatile system that isn't really receiving updates right now, I don't think. So you should be able to get a pretty good homebrew going on it as well. Obviously, you do have to homebrew it to be able to get any kind of emulators on there, but in the long run, it is going to be worth it. So the 3DS is a fantastic contender. Now, next is actually just going to be the PlayStation Portable, and this is going to be the extra portable model. So this is the PSP Go, and I actually like this one more than the other PSP models, and that's because of how tiny, well, compact and accessible it is. Now, it's not really the most feasible one to homebrew out of the bunch, because the way that the memory card is set up, it's going to be really inside. So if you want to get anything going on here, you do have to open it up and get the special adapter for it. It's not really the best experience per se in comparison to something like just a regular PSP, but this can play a lot. This can play, obviously, PSP, this can play N64, this can play Game Boy, this can play Game Boy Advance, and so many other systems like that you can fit on here. There are going to be some limitations, but like, for example, you do only have one small set of shoulder buttons, which is just L and R, one thumbstick as well, which isn't positioned all that optimally, but from gaming on this thing, I have discovered that it is actually pretty cool in practice. I like it. I think that it's got a decent D-pad, decent buttons, decent battery life. Everything about it is decent, and if you're looking for something super portable, this is about the size of a Sidekick, or maybe even smaller. So if that is something that interests you, that you could just slide up and then start gaming with it, pretty much whatever you want, within reason, of course, then this is a really cool device to go with. So the PSP Go is definitely on that list. And then lastly, I wanted to talk about the PlayStation Vita over here, which is an absolute must when you're talking about Outlier systems that you should get for retro gaming. So the PlayStation Vita is definitely going to be a stronger performer than the 3DS. But the PlayStation Vita is also going to be cheaper mostly than the 3DS, especially if you get a Japanese model like I did. I think I got this one for maybe like $120, I want to say, which is great, and I've seen the PlayStation Vita for even less. Now this is a 2000 model, which is what I wanted really, because I did want a sleeker form factor. And even though OLED is always nice to have, this display is still very nice in my opinion, and you can get some tweaks going on here to adjust the display to go at your own pace. So there are definitely a lot of things that you can do here. This can obviously play PlayStation Vita games, PSP games really well, a screen that is exactly double the resolution of the one on PlayStation Portable. So this is going to be a great PSP device as well. It's got your double thumbsticks, even though they do not click down for L3 and R3, but it's got some of the best buttons in the business, and you can emulate a bunch of different systems on here. That makes it super worth it. And because you can also play a lot of the Vita library, and by a lot of, I really mean the entire Vita library, and even do game streaming from your PlayStation 4, this is going to be very, very much invaluable for a lot of people, especially if you're already within that Sony ecosystem. So if you are already within that Sony ecosystem, I would get the PlayStation Vita any day of the week over the 3DS or the PSP, because the PSP obviously just, I mean, you can only game stream at most, I think, from the PlayStation 3, which I highly doubt you're playing right now. But this can still do the PlayStation 4, which a lot of people still have, and games are still releasing for the PlayStation 4, so that's still going to be a very valuable thing to have around. And it still works even with Homebrew, which is great. So yeah, PlayStation Vita is still a fantastic way to go. And out of all of these, honestly, I would say that my favorite here is probably going to be the 3DS, honestly. Not because of the clamshell design, but just because of the way that the menus are here. The theme store is also really cool on the Homebrew side, that is. And I just really like the aesthetics here, and also like just the fact that this is a Fire Emblem Fates inspired design does make it really cool to me. And there are more 3DS games that I would rather play over PlayStation Vita games personally. So this is why I would probably pick this one as my favorite. But I think that, more objectively speaking, more people should find more enjoyment out of the PlayStation Vita versus the 3DS. Now, next up, we're going to be moving on to the vertical handheld scene, and in this case, we actually have a lot more handhelds to talk about. I will try to keep this portion as short as I possibly can, but there are going to be a total of, I'm counting, 8 different handhelds here that I'm going to be including, so I would like to still give details, as many details as possible about all of them, still within a decent time frame. So we're actually going to go on a sort of price-oriented order here. So, like, for example, we're going to start from the cheapest and then going up to the most expensive one that I own, beginning, of course, with the Miu Mini. This is going to be one of the best little devices that you could possibly get your hands on, and it's probably the smallest one as well. So this device can play up to PlayStation 1, which is pretty limiting, but at the same time, it does still have a lot of systems in between that it can play. Now, this device has a lot of really nice things going for it, like this display. The buttons on the front are really good. Like the D-pad is quite nice, and it does have a decent amount of travel. The face buttons are also very solid, very nice, and this thing is super pocketable as well. It's super portable, really, and it's even got direct access to the battery around the back, which is going to be valuable to some people. Now, this one is going to have a 2,000 milliamp hour battery, which for a device like this, 2,000 milliamp hours is actually pretty good because of the size and the kind of display that this has to power. So ultimately, I would consider this to be a very good device. Now, some cons that this thing has are the default software. Well, as soon as you get this, you're definitely going to want to update this to Onion OS or anything like that, because the default OS that it comes with, like the default Linux kernel, honestly is really really bad. Like, it is not a very user-friendly interface whatsoever, so I would strongly recommend that you update that. Another thing are going to be that the triggers on the back, while it does have them, these are not very fun buttons to press. These are very mushy and don't feel very good. So that is another downside that this device has. Obviously, the speaker's not going to be that great on a handheld that's this small, but I don't really hold it against it. I think that it's just fine as it is. But honestly, for about $50, the Miu Mini is a really good device to get your hands on, as long as you keep your expectations in check. So this is probably what I would recommend to you if you wanted to spend very little money on an emulator. But let's say that you had a little bit more money to spend on an emulator, like just a little bit, like $5 or maybe $10 more if push comes to shove. That's when I would 100% recommend that you got instead the RG35XX, because this device is honestly really good, and for about $55 you get honestly a lot more than what you would with the Miu Mini, in my opinion. Sure, it is a larger device, which means that it's not automatically just going to be the better option over the Miu Mini for a lot of other people, but it is still going to be really good. Like, you do, for example, get a larger screen that does go edge to edge pretty much, very similar to the Miu Mini. You get a better D-pad, you get better face buttons, you get a better start and select, you get much better triggers around the back as well, and you get just a little bit better performance, I guess, like very marginally better. Either way, this can only play at up to PlayStation 1. So they both have the same limitations regardless. So I wouldn't really say that performance is going to be anything to consider here, because it's hardly going to be any different from what I've seen. Now, you do get a headphone jack with this, very similarly to the Miu Mini 2, which is something that could come in handy. But the interface for this that comes by default is going to be a lot more user-friendly than what you get with the Miu Mini. The build quality is going to be better than what you get with the Miu Mini. And you also get an HDMI port around the top, which is going to allow you to connect this to a TV and then be able to play that way on a bigger screen if you really want that, and then just use this as your controller. It is also more faithful to the Game Boy design, so if that is something that you were looking for, the RG35XX is going to be the way to go. Now, the next handheld is going to be one that I do not recommend anymore, and that's going to be the RG280V. That's because this handheld has pretty much become obsolete at this point. I think that the Miu Mini is just the better version between the two, even though these two are almost identical in terms of the size. The form factor is still going to be a little bit different, but they both have a 4x3 screen, essentially. Now, the D-pad is going to be better on this one. The face buttons could be better on this one as well than they are on the Miu Mini, but ultimately, you're not really getting a better display. I would say that it's really a little bit worse. Performance is going to be about the same, but I have seen some more hiccups on this device than I have on the Miu Mini. And while the triggers are a little bit better, you're not going to be using them that much anyway. This device is also significantly more expensive than the Miu Mini. I think it costs around $70. It's just not worth it. Do not get the Anbernic RG280V, because I believe that this device has just become obsolete at this point. Now, the next vertical handheld is going to be the Paucity A20. Now, this one I actually really liked when I first got it, and it does resemble an analog pocket a lot. For those who really want an analog pocket but can't get one, this is probably going to be an easier device to work with overall. So some things that it's got going forward is that it's got a pretty clicky D-pad. It does have one thumbstick, even though it will not click down. And you do have 6 face buttons over here, which is going to be great for more arcade-style games. And it's also got HDMI around the top, which is pretty cool. It's got an okay display. It's got USB-C. The speaker's going to be bottom firing. I think that the buttons on this feel pretty decent, and it's only got L1R triggers, but they actually feel pretty nice to press. Now, this device can play at up to PlayStation Portable, so PSP, which is pretty nice, but this thing has a 4x3 screen, so PSP isn't going to look that great on it, and it's not going to run that great on this device either, so that's another thing that's really worth noting. So this device, while it is still more powerful than the other ones that we have mentioned, it does have more features too. It's not really going to be ideal for a lot of people, because the face buttons are going to confuse a lot of people who don't play arcade games. I don't play arcade games, so having 6 buttons to me is going to be completely obsolete. But that's not really why I got this. I just really wanted to test it out. Now, this has a soft touch exterior as well, which is going to be quite different than any other vertical handheld that we're going to be testing out here. But this device, while it is pretty cool, it's not really the vertical retro handheld that I would recommend. Not anymore, because I would also kind of say that this one has become a bit obsolete as a result. And one device that made this one obsolete is also coming from Powkiddy as well, and that's going to be with this device. So this is going to be the Powkiddy RGB 20S, their latest vertical handheld, and this one's actually much better in a lot of ways in comparison to their A19 model. So this one, for example, is going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact with thinner bezels. It's got double analog sticks that you can click down on, by the way, so you do have L3 and R3 functionality. You do have a more solid D-pad overall, and you do have a normal set of front-facing buttons, which is great. The triggers are also going to be probably more accessible, since you do get L2 and R2 on here. Even though these triggers don't feel all that great to press, they are at least available to you. You do get 2 USB-C ports as well, if that is something that you are interested in. But overall, this device also has Wi-Fi connectivity, and this is still a pretty cool device. But when it comes to performance, it's not going to be much better than the A19, but this is still the one that I would recommend instead of the A19 if you wanted something like this. Maybe you wanted this particular finish to it, which is going to be a lot smoother. It's not going to be soft touch, but it is still going to be a plastic that a lot of people would find to be very nice. So that's probably when I would recommend the RGB 20S instead. But there are honestly other handhelds here that I would recommend more than it. But that's not going to be the next one. That's not going to be Anbernic RG351V. And that's just because, similarly to the A19 and to the 280V, it just kind of has become a little bit obsolete at this point. So with this, you do get a single analog stick that does click down. You do get Anbernic's fantastic buttons, including the D-pad. You do get your full set of triggers around the back as well, which is pretty cool. And this can also play up to PSP if you wanted to, but performance isn't going to be that great with PSP. It's a 3x4 screen, so you are going to have that limitation. And when it comes to the price, it's honestly really not worth it for everything that you're getting at this point. I would not recommend the 351V anymore. Because I would say that Anbernic has already made a vertical handheld that beats this one in just about every way, and that offers more features that are just very difficult to beat, especially for what is roughly essentially the same price. When we're going to be talking about the Anbernic RG353V. So this is going to be the best vertical retro handheld that I have ever tested, and it's the one that I'm going to recommend right off the bat that you get. So from this entire category, even though this isn't the last one that we're going to talk about, this is probably the best one. If you've got the budget of around $120 for something like this, then I strongly recommend it. So this can run on both Linux and Android, which is great. It also has a touchscreen, which is awesome, which is going to make it a lot easier for navigating Android for everybody. Now, this also has really thin bezels, which is going to be a pretty big selling point because games do look really nice on it. The speakers is also going to be front firing, which is cool, even though it doesn't get all that loud, but the buttons are still just as solid as ever. You do still get HDMI with this if you want to connect this to your TV, which is great, and the triggers on the back are some of the best that you're going to find on any retro handheld. Even though the RG35XX gets really close, Anbernic does a really good job with their buttons, so you do get a very good device here. This one's also more powerful than all of the other ones that I have mentioned thus far, because this can play PSP better, even though you're probably not going to want to because of the aspect ratio, but you also do get the ability to even test out GameCube on it, to test out PlayStation 2 on it, but those are not going to run very well, so I don't recommend that you bother getting this for those systems. And if anything, it might even be worth it to get the Linux-only version that's going to be the VS version of this model. So I don't blame you at all if you end up going that route, because it's also a bit cheaper while still being able to play the same games, but you just can't touch GameCube or PlayStation 2 at all. So you are going to have those limitations if you really care. But overall, as an Android system, it's cool, but you don't get the Play Store, which is what somewhat defeats the purpose of having Android here. So honestly, the VS is probably a better option overall. But when it comes to hardware, you're getting a fantastic device, and it's fairly affordable for everything that you're getting. I would say that this is a very good pick if you wanted to play higher end systems, but still wanted that vertical form factor. Also, I think that the thumbsticks over here are more comfortably placed than what they are in the RGB 20S. So I would recommend this system over any other vertical handheld on this list. Now, the final one that I would like to talk about is the GPI Case 2, which is actually one that I strongly recommend that you don't get. And that's because this thing has been so difficult to work with, and it's so expensive to assemble at the moment. So you can get the case itself and even a docking station that it comes with for like about $100, which by itself isn't really too bad, even though it's just the shell. You have to buy everything else. You have to buy the micro SD card. You have to buy the Raspberry Pi. Now that Raspberry Pi is exactly what makes this not worth it right now. Besides the overly arduous and frankly annoying process of getting this thing set up, transferring games to it, the CM4 units are very expensive right now because they are in very short supply, yet pretty high demand. So unfortunately, while this thing is actually pretty cool once you get it to work, to be able to play at up to PlayStation 1 games is not going to be worth it if you're going to be spending like $200 on it. And the dock doesn't even work for me right now. I don't know why. So while I haven't had very great experiences with it, I still think that it's too expensive for what it offers. So I would just go with the RG353V at the highest end when it comes to vertical handhelds, and I would go with the RG35XX personally, even though the Miu Mini is still a great option. If you wanted a more affordable vertical handheld, or a much more affordable one, and just wanted to play up to PlayStation 1 games, and you didn't really want much more than that. That would be pretty much everything for the vertical side of things. So now we're going to get into the next category, which is going to be horizontal 4x3 devices. So this is when I'm going to be including 5 devices on this list. And really, this is going to be a little bit more contentious, I guess. But ultimately, I think we are going to have an obvious winner, at the very least, very strong competition from 2 of these devices. So that's when we're going to start off with one device that I can still kind of recommend if you're looking for something that's just like this. And this is going to be the Anbernic RG300X. So this handheld is not my favorite, but it's got some really great features going for it here. Like, it's got really nice and super clicky triggers. It's got an amazing set of front-facing buttons. It's got a great build too, and it looks like a Game Boy Micro, which a lot of people will appreciate. Now, it's going to be larger than the Game Boy Micro. It's going to have a bigger screen, but it is like such a nice handheld to use, except when it comes to the user interface. The user interface sucks. It's got the same user interface as the 280V, which is, I mean, it's got a horrible user interface. It's Linux-based, and it can play up to PlayStation 1, even though this one has some performance issues in comparison. I think this one is just a little bit older, which is why that might be the case, but I could be a little bit wrong on that. Now, it does have dual USB-C ports. It's got HDMI as well if you want to play games on your TV with it. And again, the buttons are going to be really, really good on this device. Ultimately, because of the price, I think this does run for like about $80. I can't really recommend it if you're looking for a good value. But if you're looking for something that's just like this and you just want to play Game Boy Advance games on it, for example, SNES games on it, then you're going to have a really good time with it, which is why I wanted to include it in this list, and I still wanted to be able to recommend it, because I do think that some people will really like it, but it won't be a great value for the vast majority of people. Still think it's worth mentioning, though. And the next up on the list is going to be one of the best handhelds within this category, and that's going to be the Retroid Pocket 2 Plus. So this device, and a whole powerhouse, it is running on Android, and it is a fantastic performer as it is. It can run so many things so well. PSP is going to be really good on this device, for the exception of the screen being 4x3, obviously. But if you still wanted to play PSP games, it's totally doable on this. Now, there is an interface that you can access directly as well, which is pretty cool. And it's even got a touchscreen for supporting all of that. You get dual analog sticks, really good front-facing buttons, in my opinion, a pretty good D-pad as well. Like, I really like it. You do get your full set of triggers too, but you don't get L3 and R3 with this, so you cannot click down on these. And one of the sticks is not analog, it's going to be digital, which is a weird decision to me, but that is going to be the case. And you do also get an HDMI port around the top, so you can connect this to your TV if you really wanted to. Performance is really going to be the name of the game when it comes to this device, which is why I can give it such a strong recommendation, because you can get this for about $100 and you don't have to buy anything else for it. It's already good to go for you for the most part. You just have to get the ROMs for it, obviously, but you are getting a really strong device if you decide to go for this one. Now, it is going to have a more plasticky exterior. There are going to be some things that aren't going to be that great about it, like, for example, that SD card flap around the bottom, that digital stick instead of analog. The speakers, sure, are not that great, but they are front firing at the very least. And sure, the interface still isn't going to be amazing, but it is going to be a lot more manageable because this is an Android device with a touchscreen at the very least. So I think that there are going to be more pluses, pun intended, to this device than there are going to be minuses or negatives. So I would strongly recommend the RP2 Plus if you're looking for a very good value. The only thing that would defeat this, really, to me, or that I would end up recommending something else instead, is if you wanted maybe a 16:9 screen instead, because there's going to be a much better alternative to this one then for a very similar price, which is why I'm more apprehensive to recommending this one if you're looking for something like that. But if you want to stay within the 4x3 market, this is a really good device to get. Next is going to be a device that a lot of people liked, but I didn't personally, and this is going to be the Anbernic RG353P. So this device is going to be shaped like an SNES controller, which is what a lot of people like about it. I mean, it's one of the things that a lot of people like about it. The buttons on it are going to be really good too. It's got double analog sticks that you can click down on for L3 and R3. The triggers are pretty good on this. The hardware is just overall great on this. You even do get HDMI around the top if you want to connect this to your TV. And other cool features about it is that just like the 353V, this has Android and a touchscreen, but no Play Store. So you do get Android accessibility, and you can attempt to play PlayStation 2 and GameCube games on it, but it's not recommended at all because they will barely run at all for the most part. Now, you can play a lot of different systems, like N64 on this runs pretty well. PSP will also run pretty okay on it if you're okay with playing it on a 4x3 screen, that is. And the pads around the back are a nice inclusion for being able to get just a more comfortable hold on this device. But the thing that I really didn't like about it is the entry price for everything that you get. I don't think that this is a very good value device, because you are paying a premium to get those better buttons but still get mediocre performance, because this device is a worse performer at around $135 to $140, I think, in comparison to the $100 Retro Pocket 2 Plus that runs games considerably better, noticeably better at least, and it does still have a fantastic set of buttons, for the exception of maybe the analog sticks, because they don't click down, and it's got one digital stick. So that's one thing that this device has over it. But overall, I just don't think that this is a very good value, which is why I don't recommend it. And as cool as this device could have been, in my opinion, because a lot of people do really like it, I really can't tell you to go out and get it, because I think that there are just going to be better devices. And speaking of better devices, one of those is going to be directly from Anbernic as well, and that's going to be the RG353M. This is going to be probably their best 353 device that they have made. This is just really good, because what you do get here is pretty much everything that I mentioned from the 353P and the 353V, but you do get some additional things to really go with it, like Hall sensing sticks, which are going to be a fantastic inclusion if you do fear drifting, and if you want more precision from your sticks, these sticks also really just feel better, honestly. And while on this device, you do get something like a metal shell, which is really cool, and which is why I like to travel a lot with it, because I just think that it looks really sleek, it looks really good, and it is overall just a pretty decent performer for everything that I intend on playing on it. Sure, you don't get a Play Store on this either, keep that in mind, But if you wanted just the Linux experience, which is probably what I would recommend for these devices anyway, you get something great. Now, this is more expensive than the 353P, which is maybe what makes it an even worse value for a lot of other people, and I totally get that. But I really like it as is, and I can recommend it if you want a super premium experience from something compared to, let's say, like the 353P. Like, let's just say that you want that metal shell for the more responsive buttons as well, and those Hall sensing sticks. I can see a better value proposition for this device personally, but I understand, again, the love that people have for the 353P. Just can't really recommend it. But the 353M, to me, is fairly easy to recommend for everything that you get for it. I think so, at least. Now, one device that I still can't recommend, I couldn't recommend it when I tried it out, and I can't recommend it now, that's going to be the Anbernic RG351MP, because this is going to be a relatively poor performer for the price. This retails for very close to the 353M at $150, when the 353M is like $155. But this only runs on Linux. It doesn't have the Hall sensing sticks. It is chunkier. While it does have great buttons still, and it does have some things going for it, like the grip, I mean, the overall hardware on it, like just feeling it, touching it, just feels really good, and it's still super premium. This is also a metal shell. That's what the M stands for. Now, you are just going to get poor performance from it, worse than what you would get on the 353P and even the cheaper 353V, because this is just on a different line. It came out before those devices, which is why it's going to be a worse performer. But I still wanted to include it because a lot of people do think of this device more fondly. But if you wanted this device, honestly, just get the 353M, because it is just going to be a better value. For $5 more, you get better performance and absolutely everything that this offers, but better. So yeah, I would just recommend the 353M. So my favorite is going to be the 353M of this list, but the best value is going to be the RP2 Plus or the Retro Pocket 2 Plus if you wanted something like this. $100, $155. So that is my verdict. Now, finally, onto the final category of this video, which is just going to be 16:9-ish retro handhelds, and this is going to vary greatly in price. This is going to be the biggest category as well, which is why I know that I'm going to have to dedicate the most amount of time to it, but I will try to keep things as concise as possible. So this is going to include clamshells and just horizontal devices. So let's dive right in. First device I wanted to talk about is actually the Powkity RGB 10 Max. So this device is a really cool one. It does look a lot like a Switch Lite, which is what I think attracted a lot of people to it. Now it does have all of your triggers. It does have clickable buttons as well. And by clickable buttons, I mean the clickable analog sticks. But it is running on Linux, and it is going to have its limitations in terms of performance. But this is going to be a pretty good PSP device overall. So it does have a soft touch exterior, and what I have to say mostly about it is just that this does feel more like a toy than the rest of the devices that I'm going to be talking about here. So if you do like that lightweight feeling and also that like soft touch material to it, and that more toy-esque feeling to it, I guess, then you might really like this device. I actually really liked it when I tested it. And I believe this one cost maybe like $120. I could be totally wrong about the price because I do think that I paid extra for it. Still, at that price, I do think that there are just better options out there. So the RGB 10 Max is maybe not one that I would necessarily recommend unless you're looking for that specific feeling. I suppose set of ergonomics, if that's really what you're looking for. So that's who I think the 10 Max is going to be for. Next is going to be the successor to the RGB 10 Max, and that's going to be the RGB 10 Max 2. So this device is going to be the one that I would recommend between the two if I was to recommend either one. And that's because this one does have much better ergonomics. It feels better. I think that they did a lot better when it comes to the triggers as well, since now they're going to be stacked, and they just feel nicer. I think they did a really good job with the buttons, with the analog sticks. The screen is still just as good, I would say. That's one thing that they have always nailed with the RGB 10 devices, and the 10 Max 2 is going to be no exception here. It is still going to be running on Linux, so you're still going to be limited to up to PSP, but it does do PSP fairly decently. And you're going to get some special grips for this device. And honestly, this device just feels great in hands. And even though it is a little bit older, I have no problems recommending it because it's just so cool. It's just such a nice device to hold and to use. And I think that a lot of people will be very happy with this. Now, the one thing that it would be missing is just HDMI, but similarly to the regular RGB 10 Max, you should be totally fine because you do at least get very good hardware with it. And it's just an experience to hold. I really liked it when I first tested it out, and just getting a hold of it again, I'm really enjoying it still now. So that says a lot about the RGB 10 Max too. Now, next up is going to be the one that I would absolutely recommend over the Retro Pocket 2 Plus from earlier if you are in the market for one, and that's going to be the Retro Pocket 3. Now, the Retro Pocket 3 Plus exists, and it is objectively a better device than this one in terms of performance. So I do recommend that you get that device instead if you don't already have the Retro Pocket 3. But the reason why I'm not including that device here is because, one, I don't own it, and two, I don't own it because of the whole idea that this device just came out, I think it was in August maybe, and then they released the Retro Pocket 3 Plus in November or early December. I don't even remember exactly when, but it was very recent. So they barely have any time apart from each other. So even though you do get a discount if you want to get that device, if you already own the 3 Plus, I mean, just the 3, I don't think that it is going to be ultimately worth it because they're ultimately pretty close in price. So just return this one and then get the 3 Plus, I guess. It's not very feasible. So anyway, the 3 is already really good. It's running on Android. It's got a fantastic interface to it. It does have a Play Store too, which is really cool, so you can download your own emulators onto it if you want to. It's also got finally 2 clickable sticks, so you do get L3 and R3 with this. You get a really good D-pad for it, and this is a 16:9 device, and it is also going to be very small. Even though it does look like a Switch Lite, it's considerably smaller than the Switch Lite, and for $120, this is still really good value. Like, you could still squeeze in some PlayStation 2 and some GameCube on here, which is awesome. And one of the things that really makes me recommend this, I really like the Retro Pocket 3. Strongly recommended. Now, a device that I do not recommend is going to be the Anbernic RG503. So there's going to be a good mixture between Anbernic devices that I do recommend and that I don't recommend. This is going to be one that I don't recommend. The best thing that this has going for it is going to be that it has a PlayStation Vita 1000 screen, which is to say that it has an OLED screen, which, yes, games on it do look really good. But it's not a touchscreen, it's running on Linux only, and performance on it is going to be kind of paltry. Dreamcast, it does kind of suck on this device as well, and for the price of $135 to $140, I think $145, I don't remember exactly, I don't think that it's worth it. Also, the body, it is fairly plasticky. I don't really like how it feels. The grips on it are not that great, but they get the job done, I suppose. The triggers are pretty decent though. They're clicky. The speakers are okay. The front-facing buttons are going to be great as always. But I think that this device is just missing out on a lot, and there's just an objectively better version of this device that I would recommend instead that I'm going to talk about in just a second. But before that, I wanted to talk about the Anbernic RG351M, not the MP. So the M is a 16:9 device that is pretty much everything that the MP is, but it is going to be cheaper because it is still technically supposed to be the lower end version, but this is still a metal shell. The buttons on it feel amazing, and for PSP, which it can run, even though it can only run it just as well as the MP, it does at least look better because this is a 16:9 screen. And the screen on this one is really good too, by the way, which I neglected to mention. On the MP, it's not that great, but the M does a lot of justice in that regard. But I can't really recommend it today because better devices exist. Even with the metal shell and everything being so cool, I just think that there are better devices overall. Like the Retro Pocket 3 is not that much bigger than the RG351M, and it performs much, much, much better than the 351M, which is why I can't really recommend Anbernic's offering here, and it is a little bit older too, which is also something that is going to detract from that. But with that said, I still think it's a really good device. It's just not one that I can recommend today. Now, next is going to be the device that I would recommend over the RG503 any day of the week, and this is the device that they should have released instead. This is the Anbernic RG505, which is going to be a device that, sure, it is still comprised of plastic, but because it is more sturdy, everything feels a lot better on it. And it does have the Hall sensing sticks that I talked about earlier from the 353M, which is great. And you do also get a better set of grips around the back, which I can appreciate. But most importantly, this is running on Android, and it does have a touchscreen on it as well. And while it doesn't come with the Play Store by default, I believe that you can get it through other means, but by default, it doesn't come with it. You do, at the very least, get a bunch of other emulators. You even get Redream for Dreamcast. So you do have a lot more options for gaming on it, and you can play some PlayStation 2 on it and some GameCube on it if you want to. So this is going to be a more expensive alternative to the Retro Pocket 3, and it's going to be right on par, I think, with the Retro Pocket 3 Plus, even though I don't have the 3 Plus personally, so I don't really know for sure. But this device is going to be a much better offering because it does also have an OLED screen, the same OLED screen that the 503 has, but it is touch enabled, so you do get that feature and you do get really the most out of it. So that's why I would probably recommend this device. No, I would definitely recommend this device over that one any day because it just offers so much more. I think that the 505 is a really good device. Maybe there aren't any great colors for it right now, but at the very least, you are getting a powerful device that can manage a lot and that is, at the very least, respectable. And for about $150 to $155, it's going to be worth it, in my opinion. I can strongly recommend it. So kudos to Anbernic for releasing a good value, powerful device when it has been so long since the last time that they did. Next is going to be a clamshell, and this one's going to be the oldest handheld out of all of the ones that I mentioned, but this is going to be still honestly one of my favorites to this day, and this is going to be the GPD XD. So the GPD XD, like I said, is a clamshell device. It's got a 16:9 screen, it's running on Android, it's got a touchscreen too, and even though it's older, it does still have a lot of great things going for it. Like, it's got a decent D-pad, it's got good front-facing buttons in my opinion, and it does have L3 and R3 support, but the thumbsticks don't click down. It's got like separate buttons for it. Now, the thing that I dislike the most about it is going to be that super just resistive hinge to it that just makes it really uncomfortable to open and close. I don't like it, but it does at the very least keep the hinge positioned however you want it, and it will stay that way if that's something that matters to you. Now, when it comes to performance, it can do a little bit of PlayStation 2, a little bit of GameCube, but at this point, I do think that you're better off purchasing other devices instead, because this is old enough to be running on micro USB instead of USB-C, which is the only device out of this entire list that I have mentioned that is running on micro USB. So this is why I don't recommend it anymore, and I do hope for a successor to this, because this is a device that I really liked when I tried it out not that long ago, and that I still like today. Next is going to be another device that I really liked when I tried it out and that I still like today, and that's going to be the Paucity X18S. Now, they recently released the X18S Plus, which then they just kind of decided to rename it to the Black Edition because it is just a black version of it that does perform better, that does have clickable thumbsticks as well, which does allow you to get L3 and R3. You do still get a touchscreen, you do still get Android, and all that good stuff. What I have to say is that I don't have that device. I never purchased it, so I still have the original X18S. And this device, I think, is pretty cool as it is. While the thumbsticks are not going to be the best, the front-facing buttons are not going to be the best, this is still a really cool clamshell. The display is great. Again, touchscreen still. It's running on Android, and you can still play some GameCube and some PlayStation 2 on it. I think that this is still a really cool device. I think that it's built pretty nicely too. I really like the triggers, so the shoulder buttons, and it's even got HDMI if you want to use this on your TV. It does have USB-C. I just think that this is a really cool device that, sure, it's not perfectly designed, but I always really liked it. I did pay full price for it, so I am saying this from the bottom of my heart that I think that the X18S is a cool device. So if you're looking for a clamshell, I think that the X18S is probably the one to get, but the Black Edition might just be the better option. So go for that instead, since right now I think it's retailing for somewhere around $150, I think. Or was it 175? Somewhere around there. But it is still a decent value for what you get, and when it comes to performance, it's still pretty up there. And speaking of which, we're going to talk about a device that I have a lot of history with, but I won't touch on that in this video for the sake of time. And that's going to be the Anbernic RG552. So contrary to what the naming scheme might make you think, this device is a worse performer overall than the RG505. This one released earlier as well. So this is going to be Anbernic's first attempt into the higher end Android gaming market, I want to say. And at first it didn't release with the Play Store, but then later they released an update that gave you that Play Store, which is great that they eventually did. But this device isn't really that great of a performer as is. It does GameCube and PlayStation 2 rather poorly, but everything else it does do pretty well. Like anything under that, it does do pretty well. And while it does have a gorgeous display, and I really mean gorgeous, it's a pretty high resolution, and it's got a touchscreen too with a pretty decent Android interface, but you can get the other interfaces instead, or front ends, I should say. The RG552 is maybe just a bit too expensive to justify, especially even when compared to something like the 505. This device costs around $225. I just can't really recommend this device for that much money, because I think that it should be able to offer a lot more in terms of performance. I thought that when I got it, and I still feel that way today. So I can't really recommend the 552, even though a lot of people have made the most out of this device. I still think that it's pretty expensive for what you get, and you do have to do a lot of work on your end to really make it worth your money, at least if you ask me. Next on the list is going to be a $300 device, and that's going to be the Ion Odin Pro. So this is going to be the best retro handheld of this entire list, easily, in terms of value, performance, and that kind of thing. You're getting a shell that is very similar to the Nintendo Switch Lite, but you do get analog triggers, which is awesome. You do get a better D-pad, much better actually, better front-facing buttons, and you get a much better display as well. You get Android with it, you get the Play Store with it, which is going to be great, so you can download all of your emulators that you want on here. You can also get a specified dock for it if you really want to, and that dock is great because it allows you to plug in directly GameCube controllers. You can use N64 controllers. It's got USB ports as well, so you can plug in your own controller for other games, that kind of thing. I think that this is just a really, really good device, but in terms of performance, it does PlayStation 2 and GameCube quite well. He can play the vast majority of that library, of those libraries, just fine on this. It could do Wii as well. I think that this is just a really, really good device, a very powerful option, and for $300, it should be the definitive option, right? Like, it should be the best device that you can possibly get, kind of like the Steam Deck, how the Steam Deck is just such an amazing value for everything that it does, even if it's not technically the most powerful device out there. There are going to be better options, but they're far more expensive. Odin Pro is a really fantastic device. I have made a full review of every single device that I've featured in this video, so please make sure to check out my full review for a lot more details, but this device really just has it all and almost does it all. Even for game streaming, if you want to do game streaming, it's just so good for that as well, because it's got a full set of buttons. It's even got remappable buttons around the back, and it's got another exhaust around the back too. If anything, this is just a really great feeling device as well. There are so many things that I can say about it. It's great. The only con is just going to be probably that it's not that easy to get right now, but either way, it's a great option, and I would encourage you to get that if you have a budget of $300 and you want the definitive retro handheld to take with you. Now, the last one on this list is one that I don't really recommend anymore. I recommended it at the time when I reviewed it, but I don't anymore, and I don't recommend the successor either. It's because of the price, really, and that's going to be the GPD XP, and that's just because I think this device has become a little bit obsolete. I think that this is just better for mobile games. So if you wanted to do mobile Android gaming on this, I think this is a pretty cool device for that, because this has the aspect ratio of a much more modern smartphone, which is going to be great. And it's got great buttons as well. It's got some modularity. The D-pad is really good. It's really close to a PlayStation Vita, but with a little bit more travel. The triggers are going to feel great too. And you can take apart some pieces of it and then put other ones in, so it does have some modularity to it, like I mentioned. It's even got a front-facing camera, which is cool, so you can video chat with this, and it's got SIM support, so you can use a SIM card with this if you wanted to, which I think is awesome. but this device costs about $400, and it's not a better performer than the Ion Odin from everything that I have seen, which is what makes me not recommend it, really, because ultimately, if you're not matching up with the competition and still charging this much more, then it is very difficult to justify a device like this. So that's why I would probably say that I don't really recommend the GPD XP anymore, even though it is a pretty cool device. But like I mentioned, if you're interested in any of these devices, I have reviewed every single one on my channel, so please make sure to check it out. So now, to ultimately conclude this video, I wanted to tell everybody what my favorites were from every category, really, like right here at the very conclusion. So for instance, from the very first category, which is the Outlier, the 3DS is going to be my favorite because I feel like it is going to be the most versatile and easiest to work with out of the bunch of the Outlier category that I mentioned. And the 3DS also has a bunch of really cool designs that I really like, which is why I would go for this. Just a little bit over the PlayStation Vita, but the PS Vita is, I think, objectively the better device. It just requires more tinkering, and I still haven't figured everything out about it to this day, so that's one reason why I prefer the 3DS in that aspect. Next, for the vertical section, it's going to be the 353V. I just think that this is a really good value at $120, and you can get an even better value at $100 if you wanted just the Linux version, because you really don't need the Android portion for this, and you get just about the same performance essentially with the exact same hardware. So I just think that this is such a good value with a great display, fantastic buttons, great triggers. You can plug this into your TV, which I think is great too. So yeah, just a great value. Then next, for the 4x3 horizontal systems, I picked the 353M just because it is my favorite of the bunch. The build is amazing for it, even though it's not the best performer. I would give that to the Retro Pocket 2 Plus, but this is the one that I would buy if it was my own money, just because I really like what they offered with this particular device. Then next, I couldn't really choose a favorite here per se, so I kind of split it into a couple of different categories. If your budget is $120, then the Retro Pocket 3 is going to be an amazing choice for you, because this device just feels really good, it looks really good, and it performs really well as well. So I have a lot of great things to say about the Retro Pocket 3. I really like it. And for $120, I think that it is still a steal essentially for everything that you get. It's just such a good value. And next is going to be the RG505. This isn't the device that I would buy personally, just because of the colorway. Really, honestly, it's because of the colorway. They had better colors, like if they just had a fully black version or fully white version or something like that, then I would get that instead. But right now, I do think that this device is a really good value. It's a great performer as well. It has a beautiful OLED screen, which is going to be pretty much unmatched in this entire space, which is what makes it so cool. Performance is also going to be great on it. So yeah, the RG505 is going to be an amazing option, and the Hall sensing sticks only make things better. But my ultimate favorite, because again, if I wanted like the definitive version, it would be the Ion Odin Pro, because it can do pretty much everything that all of these other devices can, but just much better. It's got a pretty good value to it, and it's so customizable. So many things that you could do with it. It's just really cool. It's just a little bit hard to get right now. I mean, I guess that it's always been, but it is the device that I would recommend for sure. Now, thank you so much for joining me on this year's video for the best retro handheld. I promise that next year it's going to be a smaller list, since I'm only going to be including devices from that year, and probably the Ion Odin as well. I mean, depending on what comes out, but we will see. I guess that let's just say that it's going to be a more concise list. But I hope that this video was really useful to you, and if you're interested in any of these handhelds at all, I'm going to be leaving affiliate links to as many as I possibly can down below. Not all of them will be affiliate links, because I won't be able to get affiliate links for all of them. But if you use my affiliate links, you are helping out the channel a lot, which does allow me to buy more retro handhelds like this. So I would appreciate that greatly. So thank you so much again if you decide to do that. But if not, it's totally fine. And please remember that I have made reviews on every single one of these devices on the channel. So I'm going to make sure to leave a pinned comment, including links to every single review that I have made for these devices listed, so that you can watch them individually if you are interested in doing that, because I was very brief when it came to talking about a lot of these devices. So if you want a lot more details on any particular device, links down below. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram and my vlogging channel, which has kind of become a Yu-Gi-Oh channel recently. So yeah, links to those down below too. Now, with that said, Happy New Year to you, and hopefully from this video you have found the right retro handheld for you. So until next time, enjoy.